Hi guys, how are you? This session is also the continuation of the previous session. In this session, we would study about the social and religious life of the Aryans in the later Vedic period. Firstly, we would analyze the social life of the Aryans in the later Vedic period. In this period, the Varna system emerged. The Varna system was a system of four Varnas such as Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. We find evidences of Varna system in the 10th Mandal or 10th book of the Rig Veda, where we find traces of birth of these four Varnas. In the 10th Mandal or in the 10th book of the Rig Veda, we find that Brahmana was born from the mouth of Brahma, Kshatriya was born from the arm of Brahma, Vaishya was born from thigh of Brahma, and Shudra was born from the feet of Brahma. And many duties and responsibilities were assigned to these four Varnas. For Brahmana, the study and teaching were assigned. The only function for Brahmana was study, teachings, yajna, etc. The Brahmana played significant role in the social life of the Aryans in the later Vedic period. This class was the dominant class in the society. It regulated the social life of the Aryans. It also regulated the religious life of the Aryans. And this priestly class, the Brahmin class, was the priestly class in the society, and this priestly class was responsible for conducting yajna in the society, and that's why this significant class played significant role in the society. The next class was the class of warrior, which was known as Kshatriya. This class was responsible for the protection of the state or territory. This class basically waged wars, and this class was responsible for the protection of the Brahmanas and other people. And we find traces of conflict between Brahmana and Kshatriya. These two classes tried to dominate the other, but as far as the lower classes are concerned, they made joint groups to control over them. As far as Vaishyas are concerned, this class was responsible for agriculture, animal rearing, and some types of trade and commerce. This class was a taxpayers class, and on the taxes or on the tributes of this class, the Brahmana and Kshatriya were leading their lives. They were dependent upon the tributes of Vaishyas, and that was the only source of income for the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. The next Varna was Shudra. Shudra Varna was not a significant class in the society of Aryans in the later Vedic period, and it was the lowest class. in the ladder of the society. That's why this class was exploited by three other classes, and the three upper classes or the three upper varnas were only entitled to the sacred thread ceremony by the name of Upnayana. Upnayana was assigned to only three upper varnas such as Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaisya and Sudra. Not Sudra. The sacred thread ceremony was assigned to only Brahmana, Kshatriya and Vaisya. It was not assigned to Sudra. Sudras and women were not entitled to recite Gayatri Mantra, and they were not also assigned to sacred thread ceremony by the name of Upnayana. That's why we can say that the Sudras were exploited significantly, or they were exploited in the later Vedic period. The next significant feature was the change in the family system in the later Vedic period. The nature of the family system changed in the later Vedic period. As I told you in the previous session, that we find traces of joint family system in the Vedic period. In the later Vedic period too, we find traces of the family system. But the role of the father, who was the head of the family, changed in the later Vedic period. Now the father, the head of the family, became more powerful as compared to the Rig Vedic period, and he could do anything in the family. That's why we can say that the strength and the power of the headman increased in this period. Moreover, we find traces of ashram system in the later Vedic period. By ashram, I mean the four systematic arrangements of life. The life was arranged, or the life was divided into four parts. First, Brahmacharya. Second, Grihastha. Third, Banprastha. And fourth, Sannyas. As far as Brahmacharya was concerned, it was a student life, and everyone had to study in the company of a guru in Brahmacharya part of life. This period extended from 0 to 25 years. 0 to 25 years, this part of life formed the Brahmacharya. In this period, everyone had to study in the company of Guru, and he had to go to Gurukul, and he had to study Vedas, Upanishads, Brahmanas, politics, economics, etc. in the company of Guru. The next part of life was Grihastha. It was a life of householder. This period extended from 26 to 50 years. In this part of life, man had to marry, and he was entitled to many household responsibilities, and he had to lead a householder life, and he had to discharge many responsibilities in this part of life, and this was a settled family life, and this played significant role in the life of Aryans. The second asrama was Banprastha. It was the life of a hermit. In this period, the man had to try to live worldly life. He had to try to live worldly life, as he had to lead. He had lived a householder life. That's why in this period or in this part of life, man had to live the worldly life. He had to give up those things which controlled his life. I mean to say, he tried to leave his wife, his sons, and property. He had to start a hermit life in this part of life. The next asrama was sannyasa. It was the life of an ascetic, and he had to live in jungle or forest, and he had to leave everything in the world. He had to change his name too, and many more things. It was a life of an ascetic, and this was the systematic arrangement of life in the later Vedic period. In the later Vedic period, we find the deteriorating condition of women in the later Vedic period, and the women were devoid of many more entitlements and powers in the later Vedic period. Now they were not entitled to participate in Sabha, which was a significant assembly in the Rig Vedic period, but it changed in the later Vedic period. Now we would study about the religious life of the Aryans. In the religious life of the Aryans, many changes occurred. Many gods who were dominant in the Rig Vedic period now were not dominant in the later Vedic period. We find evidences of Indra and Varuna or Agni in the Rig Vedic period who were dominant gods, but now we find traces of Prajapati. It became a significant god in the later Vedic period. We find traces of Rudra, who was a god of animal. It also became significant in the later Vedic period. We also find traces of Vishnu, who was preserver and protector of the world. It also became a significant god in the later Vedic period. The most striking feature that emerged in the later Vedic period was sacrificial cult. Although in this period the recitation of prayer persisted, but the sacrificial cult emerged in this period. By sacrificial cult, I mean to say that in this period, sacrifices happened. Various types of sacrifices, such as sacrifices of animals, even sacrifices of man happened in this period too. And these sacrifices were extremely disastrous, and these sacrifices were extremely terrible, we can say. As in these sacrifices, many animals were sacrificed, we also find that the priestly class played significant role in conducting these sacrifices. That's why the priestly class occupied significant place in the society, and that's why it demanded dakshina for carrying out sacrifices in the society. We find evidences that the dakshina or gift to the priestly class increased so much in the later Vedic society, and in the later Vedic society we find evidences that the priestly class demanded so much amount of money as dakshina or gift in the later Vedic period. And it also, in the Satpat Brahmana, we find that north, south, east and west should be given to Brahmana as dakshina. But if really this happened, what would remain with the king? It's a significant question. But we find that in this period we don't find evidences of grant of land to Brahmana in this period, and this was a significant period in terms of religious life of the Aryans. When the dominant position of the priestly class became unbearable, a strong reaction occurred in the later Vedic period. The reaction was in terms of emergence of Upanishads. Upanishads were written in this period, and these Upanishads challenged the position of the priestly class. In the Upanishads, we find evidences of soul and God and meeting of soul with God, I mean to say Atmana and Paramatmana. We also find evidences of right belief and knowledge in the Upanishads, and these books are the philosophical books. These books explain the thinking of the Aryans in the later Vedic period, and these books, I mean to say the Upanishads, present a strong challenge to the priestly class, the rituals. This is the whole picture of the life of the Aryans in the later Vedic period. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.